It is time once again for another episode of the Apple Circle podcast. And I am in a more of a chipper mood this week, Matt, because there is actually some stuff to talk about. Some last minute developments, some curveballs. Things are changing and happening in the Apple world. And I am more excited than I thought I would be for next week's big event. Of course, we're talking all about WWDC, June 6th, last minute predictions here, and there's a lot to get into. But first, of course, as always, we want to get your thoughts. By the time you see this, I want you to be honest. Send your last minute predictions to our text line. The number is 949-354-3508. You can call it, you can text it. Send us your predictions, and we'll know by the timestamp if you were cheating and watched after the fact or not. Send us your predictions, then next week we can sort of go through and see what we got right and what we got wrong. And also, as you watch the event, if you see anything, you got questions, you got comments, you love it, you hate it, let us know at that hotline number. You can call it, text it, whatever you want to do with phone numbers these days, you can do. You can also check out our YouTube channel, which is the Apple Circle main channel. There's also the Apple Circle podcast channel, and this podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. So housekeeping out of the way, Matt, it's getting exciting. We're in sort of the final countdown for next week's event.
Yep, June 6th, like you said, and we are expecting, on one hand, some maybe not so exciting things, but on the other, some very exciting news here. Before we even get into it, what do you think, now that we've heard some of these things, which we're going to talk about, do you think we're going to see some excitement, or do you think it's going to be plain old boring software?
I don't know, because the last event that we made predictions on, which was the March event, right? Or is it April?
I believe so.
I think it was April.
No, I think it was whatever. March, April.
Whatever it was. That was the one that was supposed to be, by all accounts, the most boring Apple event of all time. There was nothing going to be new,
true.
And all the leaks pointed to a dud for an event. And to be fair, the iPhone SE was super boring. But those last-minute leaks on the Mac Studio and the display really saved the day and made it a really good Apple event that was super exciting. And I think that if some of these last-minute rumors are true, this has the chance to be a more exciting WWDC. Though with that being said, we always have to temper our expectations and remember that this is not a special Apple event. It's not like a sort of off-the-book event. This is a routine every-year developer conference that's really made for developers. They're going to get into SDKs and APIs, and it's more for developers and more of a resource for them, more than it is a public event for us, though every Apple event's sort of a public showcase, so we'll get some stuff. So I think that as long as we expect regular iOS 16 and sort of some minor changes, anything over that will be great. So hopefully it could be, a great event that really blows us away, or it could be sort of same old. But were there any of these last minute rumors that we can get into that caught you by surprise? Because there's a couple here, a lot of back and forth that sort of, things have been crazy the last couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest surprise is the MacBook Air. So that is now in contention of whether or not we are going to see it or not. So if you remember, the MacBook Air is supposed to be getting a full redesign, which we'll talk a little bit more in a second. But this was originally supposed to be released, or at least according to rumors, nothing is settled until it actually happens. Originally, this was rumored to be released back in that March-April timeframe. Obviously, that didn't happen. And reason being, at least, the reason we heard is that the M2 chip was just not quite ready. Then that got shifted. The rumors were that it would be in the fall, in the September, November timeframe. And then, which, kind of makes sense. They release new Macs and stuff occasionally during that timeframe. So that kind of makes sense. But it was interesting that they would wait that long to introduce the M2 when, we're expecting updates to a lot of computers at some point. And that's kind of a long time to release the next generation of the chip. But, it's the first life cycle of the M series chip, so they can do whatever they want. But now we're hearing that we may see it officially announced at WWDC. A few things to back this up. One, I saw Mark Gurman posted, maybe he posted something else, but this is the one I'm seeing, is that of all the M1 Macs that we currently have, the MacBook Air is showing shipping delays, which is kind of strange because this is the one that, is kind of most common. So they have this in stock. Most people buy this computer. So it's kind of interesting that there's delays on that. Was there anything else that he said that I missed, or is that kind of what it was?
I think that was mainly it. I mean, he sort of mentioned in his sort of weekly Power On newsletter that this was sort of the most likely candidate, that maybe supply constraints had eased enough that they could produce this, and that it's the most likely candidate we see. Though, let's talk about what is going to change on this first, then we can get into if it's going to happen or not, because I can see both ways on why it makes sense to see and also why it would be really confusing to launch this now. So can you walk us through, Matt, the highlights of why everybody's so excited about this new MacBook Air and why it's going to be such a big deal?
Yeah, so I mean, really, we haven't gotten that many updates to the MacBook Air in its entire lifetime. We got the original one, which was crazy expensive but super thin. It was very impressive when it came out, and that was awesome. But it was nobody could really afford it unless this was a luxury item. Then they released, I think, I'm trying to remember, 2011 maybe. Is that when they released the new update? That sounds right. It's in that time frame.
That's when they released. Was it 2011 when they released the 11-inch MacBook Air, the teeny tiny?
Yep,
yeah,
and it had the same basic form factor as the 13-inch. They eventually killed the 11-inch, but it had the same basic design, and they kept that design around until 2018, I believe. It was a long time.
I think so.
And then that's when they released the, I guess you would call it like the Retina MacBook Air, because that's when it got a Retina display, it got the new keyboard, it got the new design, kind of reminiscent of the 12-inch MacBook, but in the MacBook Air. And that's still the design we have to this day. So since, that's only 3 design changes in its entire life cycle, that's not very much. So the big thing here is a complete redesign for this new MacBook Air. It goes back and forth. The things that are kind of definitive is that it's going to have white bezels and it's going to come in multiple colors, kind of like what we have with the iMac with the M1 chip inside. And that makes a lot of sense. This is the consumer level product, and colors is kind of seems to be the trajectory that Apple's going on for that type of computer. Also, if you remember back to the original iBook, the very first, well, sorry, not the very first laptop Apple made, but the very, I guess you could say the more mainstream laptop Apple made back with the iMac G3 days, that came in colors. So it's kind of almost reminiscent back to those days. Something Apple's definitely done before, so not all that surprising that they would do it again. Actually, they make the MacBook Air in 3 different colors now, so it's like, let's just add a few more, make them a little bit more vibrant. Those are kind of the two that are let's say set in stone, as much as we could say it's set in stone for a rumor. And of course, my freaking Safari is like bugging out on me. It's saying I'm using too much I think, so I can't scroll. The other thing that is kind of set in stone, let's say, is the M2 processor, which I kind of mentioned before. That is likely to be in this computer. I don't
know. That's what I go back and forth on.
Okay, what do you think?
Well, I think that the more I think about it, it does make sense to debut the M2. And, we talked about this at length before. Maybe it's okay if Apple just does one M2 Mac and they sort of save the other refreshes for later. That makes the most sense for it to get the M2. On the other hand, if there are M2 delays and they launch with the M1, that would get it out the door sooner. But then the M1 doesn't work because it's going to be obsolete like within a few months. So it's got to be M2, right? Because we heard that the M2 was delayed and it wasn't going to happen. And okay, I'm going to backtrack. The more I think about this, the more the M2 makes sense. So probably M2 processor inside, which is going to be marginally better. I mean, the M1's already really great, so it's not going to be like going from like the M1 to the M1 Ultra or something. It's going to be just better, more efficient, better battery life, stuff like that, right?
That's what I think. I think it makes sense that it would be the M2. Yes, we know it was delayed, but it seems almost like, according to Mark Gurman, maybe they did figure out some of the production issues with it. Maybe they did figure out how to produce it with all the restrictions and everything. I think that's more likely because they have to... Because if this was just the one computer that was supposed to have the M2, then okay, sure, they don't need to put it in there. But going forward, everything's going to have M2 architecture, I would presume, right? So they have to announce it at some point. Otherwise, everything's going to be shifted down to a lower end processor. It just makes more sense that they would have to announce it at some point in this computer particularly, whether they announce it at WWDC or sometime later. This computer makes sense as the one to announce it in because it's almost like I mentioned this before every Apple product that they announce pretty much does this, but say the iPhone came out, had its, design. The iPhone 3G was a complete redesign because it was kind of like, okay, here's our proof of concept with the first one. The 3G is like, okay, now we can really like refine it. Same thing they did with the iPad. The second generation was a complete redesign, a refinement of the first one. Apple Watch, not so much, but they do that with a lot of products where the first version of it is like a proof of concept, and then they could really make what they wanted with the second version. That's kind of what it feels like with Apple Silicon. They released the M1 Max as, you know, it works, we can prove that we could do it, but we're just using our old designs. Then we got the M1 iMac as a desktop, and now we need to see what they could do with the laptop. And this is the first, I think, Apple Silicon laptop through and through. So, I mean, if they just put the old chip in it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, I think that especially with a redesign this big and all these new features, it's going to be worthy of that M2. And again, don't get your hopes up that it's going to be, this is not supposed to be a performance powerhouse. It's not going to be. It's not going to be like a Mac Studio or a MacBook Pro Mobile. And it's not necessarily either better than the MacBook Pro. It's like, oh, the MacBook Pro has the M1 Max. This has the M2. That means, you know, 2 is bigger than 1, so it's better. That's not how this works. No. This is sort of, you know, and Apple, to their credit, have done a good job sort of staging the different levels. There's base, there's pro, there's, man, I'm confused. Pro, Max, then Ultra.
Ultra, yeah.
And then maybe Extreme.
Then we're expecting Extreme at some point.
Right. So you sort of have your different layers there. So know that the M2 is going to be, you know, it's very versatile and very efficient and stuff like that, but it's not going to be, you know, doesn't make it better, than, you know, M1 Pro or whatever it is. So those, like you said, are set in stone. The one thing that would have been really great that doesn't seem like it's happening was we were supposed to get a mini LED display on this laptop. We have that with the MacBook Pro that has ProMotion. It's really nice. This wouldn't have ProMotion, but it would have sort of that brighter, more vibrant, colorful display. According to Ming-Chi Kuo, he was the one that really came out and said there are supply, maybe Ross Young too, just supply chain issues. It's too expensive right now. It's too complicated. Apple's dropping mini LED on the MacBook Air, and we've even heard that they're going to drop it on any other products for the year, including the new iPad Pro 11-inch.
Right.
So probably no mini LED display. There will be a notch with an upgraded camera. And then something interesting that many people either will love or hate is you've got white accent colors. So like the iMac, a white bezel around the display and a white keyboard on the inside. And I will say the more I see the iMac in person, the more it grows on me. So I'm not totally against this look. I think it's going to look really good on this new MacBook Air. It's going to look really, really sleek for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to look good. The notch, I've gotten used to it since we have the MacBook Pros. Like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It will be harder to hide the notch with white bezels. I will say that. With the black notch, you could easily hide it, especially with the mini LED display. But not so much with white bezels. But yeah, once you use the iMac for a while, and especially in more of a home setting, the white bezels actually make a lot of sense. Personally, I still would choose black bezels just because that's how I am. But I'm not mad at them, and I think they look good. And I think the white keyboard makes a lot of sense, too. It really matches the old aesthetic here, especially if you just look at like Apple's history with laptop designs. This design makes a lot of sense and seems like something Apple would totally do.
We're also going to see MagSafe come back as sort of the de facto charging port, which is really nice. Yeah. Very nice. Probably no crazy port selection like the MacBook Pro, so no SD card, no HDMI. It's going to be basically just USB-C and MagSafe. And I mean, with all that, that's a pretty major redesign for this MacBook Air. New look, new processor, new colors, new camera, new accent colors, not really new display, but, you know, new inside, new appearance. I think it's supposed to be
a slightly bigger display, so that
slightly bigger, I think, is what we're hearing. But I mean, looks like a really nice laptop. If you're in the market for sort of a good de facto Apple laptop, new MacBook Air looks basically perfect. I don't know what else you could want from sort of a nice sort of entry-level machine.
Yeah, no, this is going to be great. And I've been waiting for this laptop because I'm trying to get my wife wants a new laptop, and this seems like the perfect one. It's supposed to be out already, but hopefully it comes out because I'm excited to get my hands on this one. Like you said, well, here's a question for you, because I think you mentioned this a little bit. Would you buy this computer for your kind of around the house computer? I keep going back and forth on it.
I keep going back and forth on it because a part of me is like, well, I could buy a Mac Studio and then I'd have that. Then I could have this MacBook Pro and have all the features. But it depends on, you know, if I'm mobile, I probably don't need to be editing. I really just like want a laptop for like email and Photoshop and stuff like that. So this would be perfect. I don't know. Like you, my wife also desperately needs a new Mac. So she has a 2013 MacBook Pro that is beyond its last leg. I don't know how that thing's still
2013,
running.
that's
So
old.
it's old. So I think that maybe I'd get her one first and see how that does. Maybe I'll steal it a little bit.
That's
but,
the way to do it.
Definitely on my radar. This checks all the boxes for me, and especially if the price is in line, sort of, what is the MacBook Air now? It's like around $1,000. It's probably a little bit more, 11. Yeah. If it's around then, I might even get the base model just to have sort of a nice mobile computer that, with the M2 inside and these colors and the new design, I'm all in.
Well, and then, what's great is with the M1 or the Apple Silicon architecture, you really can get away with the base model. Like when the originals first came out, we all tested them, and while it's nice to have the more power that we have, we could easily do what we do for our job on those computers. It's completely possible. So you don't really have to spend, especially for someone like your wife, my wife. They don't need the base. They don't need the spec it up. The base model is perfectly fine. And for those off chances when we steal it, it's going to work just as well.
And it's nice too that like we're not back in the days of, and this is sort of the Intel days of like you've got the mobile processor. It's like the i3. It's like you knew that you could sort of get a decent computer, but like if you really wanted to do video editing or like if you wanted to do something in a pinch, you could do it, but it really wasn't gonna work on those machines. And there's always, the thing of, I'd love to run Final Cut on the super thin MacBook, but it just wasn't able to be done because of that M processor. Not M like Apple Silicon, like Intel's mobile M chips or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But now with M2, it's not going to be screaming through things like an M1 Max, but it's going to be fine. Even if you want to edit 4K video, you're going to be fine. So that's kind of cool to see that versatility that, we talked about this before for people who wanted buying advice. If you want to sort of grow into a machine, you don't have to do an M1 Pro or you don't have to go to the Max. Start with the M2. You're going to get a really good computer. And if you want to grow into video editing or photo editing, you're not really going to have a bottleneck. You're going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to do it as fast as the other processors, but you don't really need to do that. Especially if you're starting out, you're going to be more than happy with this computer for sure.
Right. And, I think that's a great point, especially for people who are wanting to get into some content creation, which I think the Mac has always been, focused on. Those people that have a little bit more of a creative side. Obviously, that's not, the main focus anymore. But that was really when they started. That's what they really focused on with things like iMovie and, those types of programs. But this computer is actually the perfect thing for that because, for us, we're shooting with really high-end cameras with tons of gigabytes of footage. But, I mean, the most of the videos I watch from people, especially on YouTube, are either shot on the iPhone or shot on some kind of like, affordable, not even point and shoot / entry level Sony camera, something like that. This computer is going to handle all that beautifully. It's going to be no problem. So you can really take it to the next level and just keep going in your creative field, whatever that ends up being. You're going to be fine.
So I'm excited. Hopefully we see this next week. The rumors have been a little wishy-washy on whether we're going to see it or not. I mean, on one hand, it does make sense. On the other hand, if this is for developers, hardware at WWDC has been limited. I think was the last one Mac Pro and Studio,
I believe so,
Display, Pro Display. So the MacBook Air, there's a case to be made either way. It does make sense. Look, developers want a portable, lightweight, powerful machine. We could do it with that. On the other hand, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, so maybe we'll see. But a good chance now the MacBook Air might be making an appearance next week, especially if Mark Gurman says it. Typically when Mark says something, it's usually right. So I'm hoping we see that next week at WWDC. A couple other things that we sort of touched on last week that now look like they're going to happen. Mark Gurman also said this week that iOS 16 is going to get some upgrades with the lock screen. I don't remember exactly what he said on details, but the lock screen might be getting a redesign, which is something we've both talked about definitely wanting to see on this new iOS version. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. I still have a question. I'm looking up what he said exactly just so we could talk about it. Let's see. But basically, yeah, we were talking about how having an always-on display is going to be nice for these iPhones. And still, my question is, okay, maybe iOS 16 is going to have that built in, but is it going to work on the current iPhones? That's still my question.
Well,
lock
screen, yes. Always-on display,
okay, because we've kind of heard both, right?
Right. Yes. And that's been really confusing. So I guess there's two rumors here. And they sort of, when I saw them, they got lumped together. So I was confused. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Gurman is talking about a redesigned lock screen or changes to the lock screen design. Then there were other rumors, I don't know if it was from him or someone else, that says, oh, now, sort of a weird last minute rumor, the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max, those will have an always on display mode too this year, only for those phones. So I think the always on display mode is going to be different than the redesigned lock screen.
Yeah, so here's what he's saying. Okay, yeah, so you've pretty much got it right. So from his article, Apple plans on a lock screen upgrade with widgets for iOS 16. So that's for every phone, and that's just the lock screen when you actually use it. That's gonna be cool. And then also, in addition, an always on display for the iPhone 14 Pro. So yeah, two different things here, but I'm assuming whatever we get on the lock screen in this update is also going to work in the always on display, just probably dimmed out a little bit. That's my guess. So I think whatever we see for this new lock screen is going to be very close to what we can expect for this always on display. Yeah. And that's honestly, I mean, unless I'm missing something, is that really the most definitive feature that we've heard of? For
that is it.
Update?
I think we heard and the rumors have been so sparse on this, maybe some changes to notifications. Unclear what that is. I'd heard there were some rumors, I don't know where they came from, that maybe Apple could make iMessage a little bit more social networky, but no exact word on what that would be. I mean, we're kind of flying blind right now, and I'm really curious to watch this because we really don't know what new features iOS 16 is going to have. It's either going to be really cool or it's going to be really boring or maybe somewhere in between, but we just don't know, which is sort of half the fun, that we just really don't know what to expect this year.
Yeah, it's tough. So I'm just going through a little list of these are all the ones that have been rumored. So we talked about the lock screen. You just mentioned the messages, interface tweaks, which we say that every year. But what the heck does that even mean? It's the most
general.
Yeah. The notifications, like you said, but there's no details on that. Just I remember Mark Gurman said that they would be significant. Again, whatever the heck that means. The health app is expecting to get some type of upgrade with better sleep tracking and medicine management, that's nice. Great to get health app features. And then apparently they're working on some different services. And we also heard that they're working on redesigned apps from Apple themselves. So that's kind of it. I mean, that's not very much. Hopefully, I expect that the services section of that is going to feature a lot of interesting things. Maybe that's kind of where they've been focusing on lately. In the past, we got things like IDs in the wallet. We got the car key, which I think BMW is still the only car that offers that. We got iCloud Relay. We got the I forgot what they call it, but where you can take over someone's account if they pass away. There's a bunch of services things that they have updated that we don't really use on a day-to-day basis, but they have announced a lot in that department. So I think that's kind of what we're going to see more of.
So in addition to iOS 16, the other really crazy rumor that went very back and forth the last few days was the headset. And there was a flurry of rumors that was oh, we're going to see it. There's this trademark thing. It's going to happen. We're going to see the headset. We're going to see the software. And there's a lot of excitement. Then a very stark pullback where they're actually, Minchi Kuo and other analysts, probably not. I am still of the opinion that it's probably still a little too early. And someone made the good point. I don't know. I think it might have been Minchi Kuo who said, why would Apple show off the software and especially the hardware where there's going to be such this gap before it goes to market, where they're basically putting their cards on the table and giving their competitors plenty of time to rip it off and copy it and get something out to market faster. So it seems like that Apple will probably hold off on this until the whole thing is ready. So maybe there could be some sort of talk about Reality OS, but probably not given sort of what we know right now as these last minute rumors come in.
Yeah, and if they did talk about Reality OS, they would 100% not reference it in any way to a headset. It would be strictly iPhone, strictly iPad. Here's what you can do. We're just making this more of its own platform, and all of us watching are going to know exactly what that means. But I don't think they would talk about Reality OS and link it to a headset that they don't talk about. So even if they do talk about Reality OS, I don't really care because it's going to be boring. It's going to be the same thing. It's just with some more SDKs and more APIs built in that you can do more with, but that's kind of boring if it's just on the phone. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree that it would be weird for them to announce the headset and talk about it and not release it for a year. But I mean, if they did talk about it, that would make me think that it actually isn't going to come out super far away. I think it would be like, end of the year or something like that, right? Like if they did talk about it, it's got to be coming within 9 months, I would presume.
It's got to be. And what was interesting is, again, we talked about this I think a couple of weeks kind of consecutively. I'm almost done with the book, the After Steve book, which you got to read it. It's really great. You'd love it. There's lots of really good nuggets in there. But what was interesting is, I think that there are two ways or two reasons rather that Apple does these early launches. One is what we always assume is that, there's like regulatory bodies that they've got to go through. There are different approvals they've got to get. Things go through the FCC, stuff like that. That's definitely a part of it. So there's like a 6-month gap between announcement and release because there's a lot of public filings Apple has to do. The other thing that I didn't really think of, or I guess I didn't know the extent of it, and at least according to this book, was that with the Apple Watch, for example, one of the reasons there was such a big delay between announcement and launch, and even with AirPods, was that it wasn't done. It was sort of like the original iPhone where like they showed it off and like there were some slick demos and stuff, but like there were a lot of complications with the hardware and the software that they just hadn't figured out, especially with AirPods. Apparently, like, the AirPods, they, I guess they didn't do a live demo, but they showed them off and then they released them a few months later. They like couldn't even get them to reliably connect to the phone after the announcement before the launch. Like there were still issues there they had to solve before they could release it. So I wonder if this time there's either going to be this long stretch because Apple is still like working on finalizing this thing and like getting the issues worked out, or if they would rather wait until they can have a very short window, like a month window, maybe like the iPhone 10 between announcement and release. Like maybe they wait till the end of the year and show this off, or like maybe early next year, just so they can really minimize that window. So we don't know so much about this thing. We don't know how it's going to work. We don't know what it's going to cost, whatever it is. But it's probably looking less likely that we're going to get any direct references to this at WWDC, just because it just still does not seem ready. So
yep,
that's the latest on that.
Yeah, I agree, and that makes the most sense. It's tough because for this type of product, I guess you could just announce it whenever, and you hold a dedicated event, and then you could talk about everything. You could talk about the hardware and the software, even though it makes sense that they would release it at something like WWDC because the software is such a big part of it. But for a product like this, they could just make an event for whenever, and that's fine. Yeah, I don't think we're going to see it. I don't think we're going to even get any reference whatsoever. I don't even think we're going to talk about Reality OS, honestly. I think it's going to be just, they're going to wait for it to be ready. And yeah, I think they might have learned their lesson from AirPower a little bit. Because they do announce things early a lot more than they used to. Like they would announce it and they'd say, oh, it's coming in a few months, or it's coming in like November or whatever. But since AirPower, I think all of them have actually shipped. So I would expect that if they're going to say that, at this point, they know it's going to happen, right? They're not going to take a chance. And especially on their next big thing, they're not going to, take a chance on that. It's going to be something that has to happen. So I would assume that most of the big things are done. They're just going to have to tweak packaging and tweak, materials and maybe those kind of things. Like the actual software and the user experience is all done. It's just not quite ready to ship yet. So whether or not we're at that point, I mean, we did hear that they were showing it off to board members. So it's at least ready enough to do that. So, I mean, who knows? We could get a big surprise here.
That would be the surprise of the century if that happens.
Yeah.
That would be great. I mean, I'm so excited for this thing. Like, I know we've talked about it before, but like I'm so excited to see what's new and how it's going to work. And I almost feel like this is, like you said, it's their next big thing. This is not something you want to shoehorn into another event. This really needs time, and it needs to be done and explained thoroughly, and it needs to be clear, and it needs to be done well. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if, the more I think about it, early next year, January, February, that's when we get sort of a dedicated event. Like, hey, new year, come see our new thing. But it doesn't seem like it's one of those things that can just be sort of shoved in like the last 30 minutes. It just seems like it's a bigger deal than that. Though, I guess with the Apple Watch, that was alongside new iPhones, but that was more of an accessory that's different. I feel like with iPad, that was its own event. iPhone, originally, that was its own event, right? Was it? Yeah, MacBook 2007. I don't.
No, they released Apple TV with the original iPhone.
That's right. So,
maybe not.
There have been. We're sort of it's sort of an uncharted territory. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. But I feel like for this, such a big deal. And especially since they can go all out with their production, they can do something very sleek and very tidy and sort of in a separate thing. So we'll see. I'd love to see it come early, but probably not.
Probably not. So the last kind of hardware thing that maybe we'll see, we haven't heard anything really, maybe I'm wrong, but we haven't really heard anything about this in a long time. And I don't think we're going to see it, but is a Mac Pro. Mm-hmm. Again, the last time we saw a Mac Pro update was at WWDC, and we are expecting a Mac Pro update at some point. Apple themselves has said it's coming. So this, would lead you to believe it could be at this event. But I don't think that's going to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, we haven't heard anything about this in a long time. I mean, it does make sense if they do release the M2 MacBook Air, then hey, there's
right.
Here's what the other part of the M2 line is going to be at the extreme level. And
exactly,
there were thoughts that this would just sort of be like a preview and they would show this off, or they'd release it later. So that does make sense.
That's what they did with the other Mac Pro. So
yeah, but we've heard so little about it that I don't think it's going to happen. And Ross Young, the display analyst, he says, according to him, that Apple was working on a 27-inch mini LED ProMotion display, I believe, or like a Studio Display Pro, and that got pushed. So maybe we see I wouldn't be surprised, an M2 event sometime in the fall or maybe next year that does new iMac, refreshed Mac Mini, Mac Pro, and then maybe the new display. That sort of makes sense. Maybe this is sort of another event.
Yeah, and I think like with a lot of these other products, at the beginning of the year, Apple had full plans for this to work perfectly throughout the year, and then things just went haywire. So I think mostly the products are ready. There's just a few things that they need to work out. Mainly, my guess is it's all like logistical stuff. I'm willing to bet that the products themselves are set. They just have to figure out how to get the manufacturing and the numbers that they need. They have to figure out how to get it transported over here. I feel like that's more the issue, less so the actual product. Because, I mean, Apple's good at this kind of stuff. The MacBook Air with the M2 line, I feel like they could easily do that. It's just getting all the parts and everything. So, and I guess that's the reason why I don't think we're going to see the Mac Pro, is because the latest rumor, we heard this a little while back, but the latest rumor was that the Mac Pro was going to be running on the M2 architecture, not the M1 architecture. And to back that up, Apple themselves said that the M1 Ultra in the Mac Studio was the last M1 chip. So that makes sense that, but then they also said at that same event that the Mac Pro is coming. So if that's the last M1 chip and the Mac Pro is coming, then obviously it has to be on the M2 architecture. And it would be very strange to release. Well, I don't know. They could do this, but it would be kind of weird to release the bottom end with the MacBook Air and the very, very top end with the Mac Pro. But actually, the more I think about it, maybe they would do that, because it's like, here's our new chip. It's this like efficient and this light, and goes into this super thin device that everyone can buy. But that same chip can also be this in the Mac Pro. I don't know. I could see that happening, but
it makes sense. I mean, we haven't heard anything about it, but it does totally make sense, especially since it's not a full release, just a preview.
Yeah, if they preview
it, could
it,
happen.
I could see that.
So,
yeah. But I do also see, on the other hand, like if kind of what they did in 2019 with the Mac Pro we have now, they released it alongside the XDR, which was like the perfect companion device, right? So it would make sense that they would wait until the XDR is ready, whatever that ends up being. I could see that happening. Speaking of, though, this is completely off topic, but my BenQ is speaking to me, telling me that I need a new monitor because it's starting to flicker. So
you and me both with our BenQs. Yeah. I had the issue. I'm still having the issue, and I think I've diagnosed it. Matt and I have been having lots of Mac-related issues.
Very similar issues, too.
Because we both have very similar setups, and it seems like we either use our computers the exact same way, or we have the worst luck, or we're just both hitting the life cycle walls that these products have.
I mean, we've been using them for a long time.
You have a BenQ, I have a BenQ. Mine is also flickering. I have not only noticed a little bit of burn-in on mine, but it's doing random flickers where it seems like there's an issue with the backlight. And I had a moment of panic the other day because it seemed like it was totally dead, and it just wasn't turning on, and it was really messed up. And I plugged it in directly to the Mac, and it was not the dock. I did a new cable. I went right in the Mac. It was definitely the BenQ monitor, and I was like, well, what would I replace this with if I had to? The studio display is super expensive, and it's back ordered forever. So there's like no way you're going to get that. I could get this exact same monitor as a replacement, but it's like $1,000. And it's like, if I'm already at $1,000, what I want to get the studio display. So I don't know. What's your current setup now, and what would you do? I know you've been eyeing the Pro Display XDR. Is this a sign that it's time, or what would you do? Or actually, walk us through your setup.
Yeah, so I mean, like, we both have the same monitor. So you have the 32-inch version of the 27-inch monitor I have. So it's the BenQ PD272OU, I believe is the model.
Yep.
And I think you have the PD32 OU or whatever.
OU.
Yeah, something like that. It's a great monitor. It's Thunderbolt 3. Has great color. I mean, it's an excellent monitor. I even think the design is pretty good. It's like pretty sleek. It doesn't have any logos on it or anything. It's a good monitor. And we've just had it for so long. So yeah, my center of my screen's flickering at pretty much all times. Right now it's not too bad, but it gets worse and better throughout the day. And that's connected to my MacBook Pro through a CalDigit dock. That hasn't changed. My dock suddenly started working again after a software update. Does yours still not work?
Mine is much better, surprisingly. I haven't had any random device ejections in the past week, I'd say. So
yeah, I don't know what happened. I like every once in a while I'm like, does this software run through the internet? Because sometimes it just stops working and starts working again. Like I was having a ton of issues where let us know if you're listening, if you've had this issue too on macOS, where my preview, like where you hit the space bar to preview different files, it just stopped working. It would preview the file, but it wouldn't actually open the file. It would only show me like the icon of it. And you had the exact same issue, right?
I will say that's one instance where you see the power and the beauty of macOS. That one particular use case, preview, is like the unsung hero. I love preview. Every day I'm previewing files with the spacebar, and when it doesn't work, it drives me nuts. So yes, I had the exact same issue where you go to preview a file and it shows you like the preview icon, but like it doesn't actually preview the file.
Open it. Yeah.
And I had the same issue, and I think it took a couple of reboots, and I think I had to do a Finder kill work.
That's the only way I could figure. I had to force quit Finder and relaunch it, and that would work, and then it would come back. I finally updated my computer to like update everything, and it seems to have been fine since then. There's been some little quirks here and there with this computer for sure, but seems to be okay now. But yeah, in terms of the monitor, I mean, I'm just gonna let this thing die until I can find what I really want. Obviously, the Pro Display is still on the top of my list, but the prices are still all over the place. And yeah, the studio display is the more likely option, but again, you just can't really buy one right now. So I don't know, I'm kind of out of luck. I'm just hoping this thing doesn't actually like fully go out until I figure out what I'm going to do.
I'm having the same issues with you as you are having. I noticed it first with Telegram really bad, like the interface flickers, and then with other apps, like the parts of the screen just start like flickering a little bit. And like sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. Like right now it looks fine, but like it's something with the backlight for sure. It must be the backlight.
Yeah,
going
it's a backlight
out.
thing.
And then, but like you, like I was kind of panicking. It's like, if this died tomorrow, like if the dock or the monitor died, or if they both go down, I'm screwed. But those are like two things I use every single day, like 12, 15 hours a day. Like I'm on this computer. So if those go out, I don't know what I would do. And you can't get the studio display anymore. Like it's just so backward and out of stock. And like, as is the case with a lot of Apple products, I don't know what I would do. So I'm hoping that this monitor will last a little bit, at least until the supply chain the constraints are loosened a little bit. But I guess in a pinch, I could Amazon the exact same model as a replacement. But like, you sort of mentioned, like I mentioned before, it's like, well, if you're spending $1,000, I can spend $500 and get the studio display.
Yeah.
So you should have in the ballpark, and you're going to get a better monitor. So I don't know.
The studio display is probably what I end up getting next. But if I get like a good sponsor or something that can help offset the cost of a Pro Display, then I'll probably get a used one on eBay if a good deal pops up. I think the lowest we saw was like $3,500.
Yep.
And I almost jumped on it because that's an excellent price, but that's still a lot of money. it's
an excellent monitor.
I
do have to say, Matt, as I've always talked about on this thing, speaking about things we love, I always said that if I lost my AirPods, I'd buy another one. So I'm putting
I was talking about how I
my
lost
mouth
mine last week. Yeah.
Did you go on the Find My app and did you ever contact the hotel, or you just sort of gave up?
Well, because if it was like down the street, I would have gone back and get them, but they're a state away. I'm not going to tell them to like shit my AirPods, so it's like, yeah, whatever. I knew exactly where like I did, like technically I lost them, but I just forgot them at the hotel. Like I know exactly where they are, and I'm sure
You should.
one of the
I'm sure they'd ship them
housekeepers-
to you.
They probably would, but that was a long time ago now. That was like a month ago, so they're long gone by now. I should actually, you know what? Let me do it live. Let me track them. Maybe I never actually like reset them or anything remotely because I don't know if you could do that with AirPods, but let me see if
You should
someone's
check.
actually using them. AirPods. All right, fine.
I will say the Find My app is the most useless. Well, sorry, not Find My. The AirPods Find My feature is the most useless thing. We've talked about this before. It's horrible. But as Matt looks at that, I'll tell you my quick story. I was on a flight a couple days ago, had my AirPods Pro. Actually, I had AirPods Pro and AirPods Max, and I love the AirPods Max, but just the Pros were easier with a baby. So I had the AirPods Pros in. I was listening to something, then I put them away, and then like something happened where like they fell on the floor, like they just like fell from my lap to the floor, and like I sort of fiddled around and I found them. I picked up the case, I put them in my pocket, and that was sort of it. And then I got on the next flight. I flew into Texas, jumped on another flight to go back to Orange County, and I opened the case, and there was only one AirPod in there. And then my heart kind of sank. I was like, oh, the other AirPod is on the other flight. And sure enough, in the Find My app, according to what it shows me now, I've got an AirPod Pro sitting in Texas that is probably I'm never going to see again. It was funny, too, because I went on the American Airlines website to do the lost item, and they literally have AirPods as its own category. That's as
funny.
popular
That
as they
happens
are
all the
lost.
time, yeah.
So it's gone. But
So
before I talk about what I did, tell me
Okay, go ahead.
what you see. What do you see?
So very interesting. The last update I see for these AirPods, first of all, they're still here. They are still at the same hotel. And the last update is May 30th, which was yesterday or 2 days ago. So someone didn't find them. They must be still hidden in those cushions or something. Because, okay, now that's interesting. I'm surprised nobody found them because I know exactly where they were. I left them on the bed. So maybe.
Well, do you
they,
think
like,
that
went through the
someone
wash or something? Maybe
do you
someone
think that
who works
someone
there.
took them, or they're sitting there, or I don't know. That's weird. You should call them. They've got to have them there.
Oh yeah,
Because
maybe they
for
found it
me-
put it in the lost and found. That's what it is.
For
That's gotta
me,
be it, right?
for me, I see, because this just shows you how useless the app is. We were visiting my in-laws in Pennsylvania, so it shows the left AirPod is in PA and the right one is in Texas, even though I have the left one here and I can open it and I put it in my ear today to listen and like test it, and the location it doesn't update. So I don't know why the Find My app, or at least in particular the Find My support with the AirPod, is so bad. The location just does not update. So
Well,
anyways,
I think the Find My support maybe only works if it's in the case, like the updating, maybe.
but like I don't know why. So I have the case right here, and I'm looking at the Find My app, and it still says the AirPod is last seen May 26th in PA. I don't know why it's not saying the left is here right now. It's like in California. I don't understand why it's not.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Let me do a force refresh. But anyways, to make a long story short, I debated my options. I was like, well, I got a couple options. I could live with one AirPod, which isn't going to work because you can't do noise cancellation. I could buy AirPods 3 or a used pair. Well, I could buy a used pair, but I could buy AirPods 3, but I use the noise cancellation at the gym. That's like a big deal for me, so I don't want to go AirPods 3. AirPods Pro are always on sale, but I don't want to spend $160 on a new set when there's going to be AirPods Pro 2 in September. So I got like 3 months to wait. So I ended up just going through Apple, through their support, to get a replacement bud. And they rip you off. It was like $85 plus tax. It was like basically $100 for the single AirPod to replace, which is crazy. And they overnighted it, and I should get it today, which I'm excited to see. But yeah, so basically don't lose one because it's a ripoff, and it's, for $60, you could, instead of buying the single bud, you could buy a whole new case, both AirPods. Anyways, like I said, I use AirPods Pro every day, so I had to buy a new bud, even though it's going to be useless in about 3 months. So
Yeah, but hey, you're putting your word to what's the word? I don't know what the saying is.
I'm
here,
keeping
but
my
basically-
word.
Yeah, you're keeping your word. You said you were going to do that, and you actually did. I'm going to contact this hotel because I guarantee it's sitting in the lost and found. That's the only way it's still at the
Oh,
hotel.
it's gotta be there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we had a thing a couple months, it was a year ago. My wife and I, we went to a hotel in Washington State, and when we got in the car to leave, she had like a little like engraved like knife kind of multi-tool thing on her keychain. It like fell in the parking lot at the valet, and they put that thing in an envelope and shipped it to us free. So I'm sure that the hotel would send you
All right.
the AirPods Pro.
I'm gonna call them after this.
But
yeah, I'll pay for them to ship it. I mean, it was my fault. I left them there, so I'll pay for it. But I'm gonna call them and we'll update next week. See if they actually do anything about it. If they saw, because I can still make a sound on it. I could hit the make the sound thing. So I'll say like, hey, do you have AirPods there? And they'll probably be like, yeah, we have a box full of AirPods. And I'll be like, all right, I'm gonna make mine make noise. Can you send them to me?
And I always thought I was like, how do you lose a single AirPod? I'm like, how dumb do you have to be to lose a single AirPod? And then, hey,
that's you.
Joke's on me because it happened to me. And it's easy. And that's what happens is like when they go down on the ground, usually the case,
if you drop it, you gotta
fly
check.
out.
Yeah.
So,
if you drop the case, they will explode like a grenade.
Yep.
Usually.
And
so
you always
gotta check.
I picked it up, put it in my pocket, and I sat down and I opened this up. I was like, where in the world is the right bud? And I can tell you where in the world it is. It's in Texas, where it will remain, because I'm sure that nobody. And that's the thing too, is like for the airline, it's like if they find one bud, they're really gonna catalog it and put it in the lost file. Like I get it, like it's just sort of a lost cause. So lesson learned: don't lose your AirPods. And Apple, I'd love to see better Find My support with this, because for some reason it still says mine are in 2 different locations, even though I got one right here. So hopefully that is a fix with AirPods Pro 2, which we talked about last week. Super excited for that, and I'm ready. I'm ready for that upgrade. Just got to wait now for like 4 more months. So guess I'm going to stick with AirPods Pro a little longer.
So here's something interesting. Back to the display. So I'm looking at one of these. It's a Pro Display XDR 32. It's got the standard glass with the Pro stand. So it comes with a stand. $4,000. Not bad.
It's a good deal.
I mean, that's a lot, but not bad.
That's
this
a $2,000 discount.
Yeah. There's another one here that seems a little sketchy. It's obviously up for bid, and there's it doesn't say there's any reserve or anything, but this seems like a little too low. It'll probably go for much higher than this, but it's Pro Display. It does have the nano texture, but no stand, and that's going for $3,000 right now, which
that's a great deal.
If that even is anywhere near $3,000, that's like someone's getting a steal for that. But actually, looking at the listings that are here, there's not a ton of listings usually. Like you have to kind of check, periodically, but the prices seem to be going down a little bit, so I got to keep an eye on this. One of these days, I will get this monitor. That's the goal. It's
such a good monitor, and the people who have them love them, and there really hasn't been a successor to it. There hasn't really been any competitions. It's like they've just been a very minimal depreciating asset. They've held their value really well. So
yeah,
that's the thing too, is like there's like a few things that if you work from home and you work on the computer a lot, there's things you should invest in: a good chair, good desk, keyboard and mouse, and then display, because you're looking at the thing all day. And for me, it's like I don't want to spend anywhere near $1,000 on a display. I don't want to spend $1,500 on a display, but if it's something you use every day, it's totally worth it. And I think these BenQs, granted we didn't pay for them, I think they sent them, but they've been fantastic displays, really, really good, and they've held up. I'd say we've had these for probably
3 years,
5 years. No, it's been a while. I think we had them back in like 2018. I don't know if we got in 2017. So it's been, if you look at it that way, you'll look at a 5-year investment, $1,000 price, $200 a year for a good display like this, it's worth it. So we'll see. Maybe some changes are coming to Matt and I's setups, and I'd love to redo this setup, but it's just been like for me it's like I have to hook it up because I have stuff to do, and it's like I don't have time to fiddle with it and like replace it, and it'd be nice to have thousands of dollars redo your setup, but that's not the case for all of us. So we're just gonna see what happens with our displays and hope they don't go out.
Hopefully, but there's always the best time to spend money is when you have no other choice. So who knows? Maybe it's a blessing in disguise, but hopefully not actually. Okay, getting back to WWDC, we totally went off on a tangent there, but wrapping it up, there's really not much else to talk about. WatchOS 9, macOS 13, and tvOS 16. Yeah, I forgot to change the number for that. We really haven't heard anything about that. I think the main thing is like macOS 13 might be called Mammoth, because I think there's a trademark for that, and that makes sense. That's one of the most popular places in California. So that's about it. We don't know anything else about that. I would expect kind of similarly to last year and the year before and the year before that and the year before that, whatever they announce in iOS is probably just going to come to the Mac as well. That'd be my guess. The last thing, though, which we'll talk about just for a few minutes here, iPadOS 16. We haven't heard anything on this except for maybe a new multitasking interface and some windowing multitasking, possibly. That's about it. That's all we've heard. And yeah, have we heard anything else? Am I missing something here?
That was it. Like, that was the big one. Is like, apparently the rumor is like you can like resize these windows and like put them around sort of like Mac OS ish on the iPad, and that'd be kind of cool.
Nice.
But
yeah.
They keep doing these things where like it's not a computer, but they're going to make it a little bit more like a computer, but they're not going to give you desktop apps, but they're going to put a desktop processor in there. So I'm still confused as to what the strategy is for the iPad. But the iPad is one of those devices that I love it. I use it for content consumption mostly, but I will probably put the beta on there because it's like a very low risk thing. It's like, I'll put the iPadOS beta on there,
definitely.
see how it does. iOS 16 though, I guess it always depends on the features. If it's like a really cool feature, maybe for that new lock screen, maybe, but it's always a nightmare, and I always say don't do it. Then I usually do it. Except last year, I don't think anybody did it because iOS 15 was such a nominal update.
Yeah, no, that was the first year I didn't update until the public beta, which I've never done. I've always updated day one since I had the original iPhone.
And I guess not to get off too much on a tangent, but Matt, should we give some advice?
Yeah.
Could you explain the difference between the developer beta and the public beta, and who should be updating to anything? Like, when should you update the developer? When should you go to the public beta? And, you know, is it something you should do for fun, or is it something you should sort of avoid like the plague?
Well, the first thing to rule out is, do you need your phone to work 99% of the time? Because there can always be an issue with your phone, right? You can drop it, you can break it, or the software could just randomly glitch out, even though that's really never happened, but you know, it's possible. Something could go wrong. But aside from those use cases, do you need your phone to work? If you do, then don't even bother with any of the betas, whether it's developer or public. Just don't worry about it. Wait for the official software to come out. And then even then, you should probably wait, you know, a few weeks, just, you know, get the iOS 16.1 or 0.0.1, you know, wait a little bit for your update. But if you can, you know, survive a little bit of stress, a little bit of, you know, crashes here and there, some issues, then the beta is not a horrible thing to do. It's fun to try out. The difference between the developer and the public beta is really just, you know, development time. So when they announce iOS 16, it's definitely not done. They're going to be making changes to it. They're going to be adjusting things. And this is really more for people who are developers to get their hands on it early so they can update their apps with all the new APIs and everything in the back end. But they're not so much worried about the phone working because they're developing with it. The public beta is obviously still for development, but it's more so to run on an actual phone. And at this point, when we get to the public beta, a lot of the major bugs have been worked out. There's still going to be some issues. There's still going to be some changes, but they've kind of worked those out. So it's enough that they can let the public have access to it, and they're not too worried about it. But yeah, last year we waited until the public beta, and unless they do some crazy things with iOS 16, I'll probably end up doing the same thing again, honestly, this year.
What's funny is that I feel like the public beta was born out of the too many non-developers bricking their phones like I did when I was a kid. And like, because with the developer beta, usually that, I think it might have changed this year, like in recent years, but like when you upgraded, you like could not downgrade. Like you were on this foreign OS that the computer didn't understand and the phone didn't understand, so you could not downgrade. And you were sort of stuck for a while until there was sort of workarounds for it. And I feel like so many people were sort of, and then there was a whole side market of people claiming to get you access to it and then ghosting you. So people were stuck with these. So I think the public beta is like, look, Apple's like, if you want access to these new features and you want to play with it on your phone, you can do it. We're going to put you on a later release cycle, so you're not going to have any catastrophic bugs. You can do it for free. You can, you know, enjoy it, and then you can sort of downgrade and get out of it later. That's still a pain. You have that option. The developer beta, though, you do have to have a registered developer account. You have to pay, I think it's like $100 a year to sort of maintain that, so it's more of a process. But I think the install process is relatively easy. It's just sort of adding. It used to be IMEI that you had, or the UDID, that's what it was. You had to give your unique device code and register it against a database to do it. These days, I think, isn't it just like a certificate, or is that just public beta? I don't remember what the process is like for the developer beta, just since it's been so long since we've done it.
No, I'm pretty sure it's the same way. Yeah.
UDID?
They made it a lot. You have to go into. Well, actually, I haven't done it in a while either. The last time I remember, you had to go into like the back end of the developer portal, enter in your UDID, and then you would download the profile. Or actually, you know what? I think the way they do it now. Someone in the audience will remind us, and we will know next week because we're probably going to be doing it. But I believe now the way that you do it is you go into the developer portal, and the only way to access the downloads is to be a developer. So you can go into developer.apple.com right now, but you won't see anything to download except for like the current stuff. But if you are a paying developer, then you can go see the betas that are there available. I'm pretty sure that's how they do it. And it's just the IPSW or ISPW, whatever it is. And you download that. Actually, now I'm thinking. I think you could do it that way, or you could do it on your device and download the certificate.
They've changed it in recent years. It used to be really confusing, and there was always the big thing I was always afraid of is that iCloud backups on the newer beta I don't know if it's still the case, but they don't work on the reverse one. So like if let's say, okay, I'm going to get iOS 16, I back up my phone. If I restore, iOS 15 does not understand iOS 16 stuff. So like you have a broken backup, so it doesn't work. So that's like one of the many reasons to be wary. Also, battery life is always horrible on the first couple betas. So it's like, unless you really, really don't mind tinkering and you don't mind paying $100 to get access, you can do it. But if you just want to have access to the new features, wait for the public beta. They're usually way more stable, and it doesn't mess with your phone as much. But it's really going to depend. It's all going to be about the features. If it's a really, really cool redesign and stuff, I remember iOS 7. I was like, oh, it's such a big deal. I got to get on it. But this year, if it's minor, might not be worth it. So sort of keep that in mind, especially it's very easy to get caught up in the WWDC hype when everybody's downloading it. And it's like, oh, I'm going to pay my credit card and get on there, and just be cautious. Also be cautious of people who claim to give you access to it, because it's always been another issue. So just take a breath and decide what you want to do, but do everything officially through Apple, and either do the public beta or do the developer beta, but don't give some random person your UDID and hope they give you access, because that'll never end well.
Yep. Yeah. Just be safe out there. And usually if you see someone like reputable talking about it, then it's fine. But just be careful. And I think unfortunately this year you're not gonna have to worry about it too much, because it doesn't seem like it's gonna be that exciting. And plus, like when they do like things like the lock screen, where I'm guessing, I don't know what the lock screen is gonna be, but say it is something like widgets, a lot of the times you can't use them unless it's the dedicated Apple apps until developers update their apps, which doesn't happen until it's fully released. So it's like you can barely use the features anyway. So it's like, just wait for most people. But we'll let you know when it's out. We'll let you know if we did it or not, and if we did, then we'll let you know how it is. Let's put it that way.
Yep. We will do just that. And I think that about wraps up what we know right now. Next week, of course, we will do a full deep dive breakdown as to everything Apple announced, what they did announce, everything you need to know. And we'll finally find out if the MacBook Pro is coming or MacBook Air is coming, and if iOS 16 is worth it or not. Of course, we want to hear from you guys, your thoughts, questions, comments, last-minute predictions. Let us know at that Apple Circle hotline number, 949-354-3508. Again, leave us a rating in your podcast platform of choice, because it really does help the channel. And I think that is it. Thank you guys, as always, for listening or watching. We appreciate it. We'll see you right back here for a post-mortem of WWDC 2022 next week on the Apple Circle Podcast.